and we found out that the rate of like premarital sex
Yeah.
in the church is the same as outside of the church.
What about the divorce rates?
Same.
Okay, so
Uh-huh.
I think I'm a math guy, so
Okay.
I'm always doing these kind of things and looking into it. And I haven't done this for a long time, so I don't know if the statistics are still valid or not.
Okay.
But last time I looked into it, something like 20 years ago, people that abstained before marriage had a better chance of surviving the marriage afterwards.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Pastor and Wife podcast.
We welcome you to hang out with us today.
I'm Hansel.
I'm Natalie.
And I'm Dr. Frank.
We got a guest today. He's a good friend of ours. And could you introduce yourself before we ask you the question?
I'm Doug Frank. I grew up in Northern California, so not too far from you here, but then went to school in Santa Barbara, and now I live in Ohio. I'm a scientist, and I've been traveling the country for the last 4 years, teaching people how to wake up, how to become politically active, spiritual revival, and how to fix their elections and that sort of thing. That's what I've been doing for 4 years, and that's how we met.
Yeah, that's why we're friends, because we're into that as well. So we have a question for you because we know you've been traveling for the past 4 years.
Yep.
You've spent limited time at home.
Yeah.
And you've been married for how long?
43 years.
43 years. So we want to know about that. We want to know, how do you keep a strong marriage if God has a plan for your life like yourself?
Well, I think of this period of my life as a tour of duty.
Okay.
And it's not a military tour, so I don't want to be disrespectful to people that have served in the military. But if you think about it, guys who serve in the military, they'll be overseas for a year at a time, and then they get to come back and see their kids and their wife for a short period of time, and then they're back out again. And I get to go home every 2 or 3 weeks.
Oh, okay.
And so, I'll be on the road, and then, typically I'm 2 or 3 weeks on the road, and then a day or two at home, and then 2 or 3 weeks on the road, and then a day or two at home. After the November election in 2025, I was home for a good 2 months. So that was
nice.
and that was after 4 years on the road. So that was really different. It changes the dynamic, of course, of our marriage, because when I come home, there's a list of honeydews.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
I need the gutters clean. Can you change the light bulb in the dining room, and the things, the daddy things. So it changes that dynamic. But I really think the reason why the formula is working for me now, as I'm doing this around the country, is a couple of things. One of them is we've been married 43 years, so we have this stuff figured out.
Yeah.
And if you have good communication with your spouse, you can work this stuff out. And I also think that we're complementary personalities. I'm very extroverted, as you've noticed. If you've been to any of my talks, I could talk 3 or 4 hours with barely taking a breath. Okay.
Yes.
It's my personality.
It's a gift.
I'm very extroverted. It's the way God made me. So I'm very extroverted, and she's introverted. And even in the early days before we were married, and we would spend time together, it seems like I said 90 words to every 10 of hers. And
Okay.
That sounds familiar.
Yeah, with us.
Yeah. And what's funny to me is, when you're young, you're still learning about yourself. And I would find, I'm an extrovert, so I would find myself rambling, and finally, maybe by the third iteration, I'd be saying what I wanted to say. And then she would say one sentence, and it would be like, wow, that was even better than mine, and you just didn't say with anything. So it was like, there's like different modes of thought. And so we're very complimentary in that way.
Okay.
And sometimes I'll come home from trips and I'm like, wow, you should hear about what happened in Oregon. You should hear about this. And I'm all anxious to talk. And she understands that I'm excited and want to talk. And she'll let me do that. And then she'll say, okay, now I'm ready to go back to my book. Or now let's go, play with the kids or whatever. So I think the reason it works is because we're complementary, and I think marriage is more than just the relationship with my wife. It's also our children.
Yeah.
And so I think if I had little children at home, I think it would change the feeling of this to a great degree. My kids are all in their 20s. And so a lot of the work I do, I feel like this is the right time in my life, and a lot of times things have come together. It's a nexus of multiple things. I don't think I'm here by accident at all.
Yeah.
And and I know that's not necessarily the topic of this conversation, but how many people do you know that have been modeling elections for 40 years? How many people do you know that have been modeling epidemics for 40 years? How many people that's also an expert at mRNA technology and also a scientist and also a Christian and also an extrovert and also able to speak publicly.
Right.
And I made a major scientific discovery back in the 1990. It made me world famous. I got nominated for a Nobel Prize in chemistry.
Yeah.
And so for about a year and a half, I was traveling the world speaking at universities. So I kind of learned how to be in the limelight. I learned how to travel and how to be a speaker and prepare presentations. I say all that because I don't think God wastes anything.
Right.
And I think all of this came together right now. And I just think, the story of Esther, everybody always talks about, for such a time as this, they always say that. But really, I like to think of it on another level. Esther was not only in the right place at the right time, she was also beautiful. So that the king was attracted to her.
That's right.
Okay, in other words, he doesn't waste anything.
Good point.
Every element came together at that point in time, and that's how it feels to me in my life right now. I feel like all the elements have come together for me to be doing what I'm doing right now. So really, if you say how do you do this, it's almost like I don't even have to think about it.
Okay.
It's like I was made for this. I'm just answering the call and I do what I'm supposed to do. So I mean, I used to be a youth minister 20 years ago. And I used to tell the kids, if you follow the recipe, the cookies come out right.
That's right.
And so if God is the ultimate recipe maker. And so the Bible is full of wisdom. The Bible is full of recipes. And if you start out in the right place and you follow the recipes, then God takes care of the rest. We've had these talks about science and Christianity and how I think about the world because of my science. God's outside of space and time.
That's right.
So it's not an accident that multiple threads come together at the same time. It's there are no accidents.
Right.
That was a long answer, but I think I'm getting to the point you were asking me. Because I had to ramble around to get to it because I'm an extrovert.
Right. I feel like your wife has to understand that for the relationship to be strong. Because if she didn't, it would be problems, right?
Well, that's a great point. So when it was in December of 2020, and I was asked by the state of Pennsylvania to look at their work, and so I did, and I found all kinds of problems with their election, and then Mr. Lindell made a movie about me, right? So
Mike Lindell, for you guys that watch us, it's Pillow Man.
Yes. And so
The My Pillow Man.
suddenly everybody around the country was asking me, Dr. Frank, come and help us with our elections. And so I remember telling her, I'm not going to be able to continue. I have work for myself. I have a business. I manufacture custom electronics for people and devices, analytical devices. And so I said, I'm not going to be able to make money and travel the country at the same time. I'm going to have to set aside my income and I said for 6 months, and then I'll be back to work. And then 2 years later, she's looking at me. We're having to talk over Christmas dinner. How much longer is this going to last, honey? And I'm like, I think it might be the balance of my lifetime.
Wow.
And because I didn't realize how disastrous it was. And her words were, she said, that's all right, honey. This is your calling.
Wow.
That's what she said to me. So if you think about it, my kids are growing up. I'm at the end of my career, not the beginning of my career. So we don't have a mortgage. There are lots of things have come together so we can afford to do this. And I joke about it when I'm on the road. I say, how can you do this, Dr. Frank? How do you afford to do this? I say, well, I'm at the end of my career, and my wife has a job. Okay? Right. So I mean, that's a long answer, but I think I'm getting to the point you were asking.
Yeah. And we've talked about that before on our podcast in different episodes that, I think it was the one where we were talking about like you being a pastor, me being a pastor's wife, but it's like it's my calling too. Like if someone's in law enforcement or something, the marriage might not work if the wife doesn't know that's her calling too, and she doesn't go out there and fight crime or whatever, but it's definitely a mutual calling.
I think the pastor's wife is the hardest job on the planet.
I
was a music minister for many years, and I had a rule. I was a church music minister. Anytime the pastor's wife asks a question, the answer is yes. Anytime she asks me,
I like you.
because that is a huge job. And it's funny that you bring that up. My middle child, Daniel, he's studying for the ministry right now.
Oh, cool.
And the first time they've been married 2 years now, but the first time I ever met her in the car, we were driving back to Cincinnati, a long drive in the car together, and I looked over and I said, "You realize you're signing up for the hardest job on the planet."
Wow.
And she said those exact words. She says, "I think it's my calling."
Wow.
And so I 100% agree with what you just said. That I think that's a key thing in their marriage. So he's going to be a minister. That entails certain things.
Yes.
I don't know if I could be the wife of a police officer. Every day he's walking out that door and he might not come home.
That's hard.
That's not in my heart. I don't think I'm built for that. So guess what? That's not what I should do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And God creates us in a certain way according to His grand plan, right? So it's just our minds are finite, so we don't see the whole thing, and so we obey. So, and that's my question too. My question pertains to that because a lot of wives complain, "Oh, my husband's like too busy doing this and that." But it seems like if the husband and wife are both part of God's plan and obeying Him, it's not such a big issue.
Yeah, and I joke with my sons.
Okay.
I tell them, don't ask me about dating because I don't know how to do it. Because I was in 10th grade and my wife walked, and I was the leader of the Christians on Campus group in high school. And my now wife, Donna, walks into the room. It's the third week of school. She's a 9th grader. I'm a 10th grader. And that was it.
That was it. And that was it.
And 2 weeks later, I told, or maybe 3 weeks later, I said, "I'm going to marry you." And
did you tell her? You actually told her?
I actually told her.
Wow.
I said, "I'm going to marry you." And she's like, "Okay, yeah, right." Everybody.
Right.
And I said, "No, I know we're going to be married. That's just the way it's going to be." And we got married after my junior year in college, and we were together. And so it was one of the happiest days of my life. One of my happiest, wrong word. One of the proudest days of my life. When my middle boy Daniel, who was away at college, he was studying at UNC, University of North Carolina. He called me one Saturday night, his second year in college, and he says, "Dad, I met a girl tonight it was an initiation for the new freshman people." He says, "I met a girl tonight. I'm going to court her."
Okay, that's a good word to use.
And the next weekend, he's at her house because she's from North Carolina, meeting her parents and her family. 3 weeks later, she's in the car with me because he asked me, he said, "Dad, would you please send me a plane ticket so I can bring, so we can come out?" And I wanted Emily to meet our family.
Yeah.
Because we're courting.
Yeah.
And I said, "No, I ain't saying plane ticket. I got in the car and drove out there. Are you kidding? I'm getting 8 hours in the car with my future daughter-in-law." Okay?
Smart.
And the other thing was, I could afforded it, but no, I want that 8 hours of quality time. And it was fun because he slept in the back seat and she and I sat in the front of the car and talked the whole time. So I guess that's kind of a long way to get around to it. But I don't think I chose my wife. I think God did.
Yeah.
And I don't think my son chose his wife. I think God did. And so, I don't think marriage is, you meet somebody, you fall in love, and you decide you're going to marry him. I just don't. Marriage is a spiritual institution.
Yes.
It was established by God. We're supposed to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. We're supposed to consummate that in a sexual way.
Yeah.
That's what all of this is about. Okay, that's what marriage is about. It's about relationship. It's about intimacy. It's about procreation. It's a religious thing. It's a spiritual thing. And so as long as you understand that going into it, I think that's what I mean by following the recipe. So many of the threads come together naturally if you think of it that way.
That's really good. Because considering you've been married 43 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's funny. You know what's funny about that? March 20th, a few days ago, first day of spring, is a more important anniversary to my wife.
Oh, okay.
It's our first date.
No way.
Okay.
And so I sent her a text, and I was on the road, and I called her up. Hey, honey, March 20th is our first date together, first day of spring. How romantic. So,
Wow.
but so,
I remember our
and we still have that kind of romantic thing to it.
Yeah.
And so anyway, we can talk more about that kind of stuff too if you want, but
Yeah.
there are things to marriage. Marriage is an up and down thing. It's, sometimes you're hot and heavy, sometimes you're mad at each other.
Yeah.
And that's the real world. And it's be like that with any relationship, any friendship. And but when you're fundamentally committed from the start, based upon the right foundation, which is a religious. I don't like the word religious. A spiritual.
Spiritual,
commitment. Yeah, it's a better word.
Yeah.
But the reason I'm thinking religious is because marriage is a religious ceremony.
It is. Yes.
But that's the wedding.
Yeah.
But the marriage is an intimate spiritual union, and I don't think those are. There's a reason Jesus uses marriage as his metaphor for describing his relationship with us, the church.
That's right.
That's not an accident.
It's not.
It's an intimate spiritual relationship.
Yeah. The word "know" in the Bible means
K-N-O-W.
Yeah, K-N-O-W. Like you said, into me you see, intimacy.
Yes.
Where things are transparent and we share everything.
Yeah.
And so when I see, guys that are professionals that are out there, moving the needle and having a good marriage, that's why I wanted to bring you on. It's because it's quite an opportunity kind of to pick your brain and see how you live. Because I want everybody to live that way. Yeah,
and I don't even think you have to be on the road to experience. I think if your mindset was correct in the first place, you're going to make a lot of the right decisions.
Okay.
If you're I remember I come from a broken home and multiple marriages, and the lineage on my side is a mess. On her side, no divorces. It's like they're perfect generations of Southern Baptist families, one after another, right? and she told me when she met me, she says, "Well, I told my parents I was never going to marry anybody from a broken home. I would only marry because to them." Marriage is a sacrosanct thing. Marriage is a vow with God, and it's a serious thing. So she had to become convinced that I was genuine, and that. And I remember telling her right at the beginning, if we get married, that's it.
That's it.
We're never ever discussing ever separating.
That's it.
It's like we don't even need to, because we're never going to do it. This is it. This is it. So, and that sort of frees you up too. Because if every time you get in a fight you're afraid that you might get divorced, well, you won't fight.
That's right.
If that's not even a possibility, man, let's get them out. Let's duke them, rock them, sock them,
really
robots.
Are able to show who you really are, and not to have this facade, of a relationship.
Or you don't want your relationship based on fear.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Doc, I got a Bible verse for you. We got to make it legal, this podcast. So I'm reading from Proverbs 21. So it's Proverbs 21, verse 9. It is better to live in a corner of a housetop than in a house shared with a quarrelsome wife. So, do you quarrel with your wife?
Of course I quarrel with my wife. All relationships are quarrelsome. I'm glad you're reading from Proverbs. Somewhere in my youth, someone said to me, you should read a Proverbs every day.
Yeah.
And you always know which one you're on because there are 31 Proverbs. So you just pick the one that matches the day.
Right.
And so throughout my life, especially in my college days, I was reading a Proverbs every day.
Nice.
And the basic principle there is why there's so much wisdom collected in one place. And so if you fill your mind with all that wisdom, you're more likely to make better choices and better decisions. And so I that's what I mean when I said earlier, I'm follow the recipe. There's so much wisdom. So Solomon, why do I need to repeat his mistakes? I'm going to learn from the mistakes. And my father always used to say, when you can, a smart man learns from his mistakes, but a wise man learns from the mistakes of others.
Yes.
So let's don't repeat those errors, right? And so a lot of that kind of wisdom went into my early days as a Christian, and in early days with my relationship with my wife. And for example, we stayed pure until we were married.
Okay.
We believed that marriage is a a spiritual thing, and the whole idea that God invented of you coming together in that way is a spiritual moment, and so we protected that. Okay, and that's, I think that's an important thing, and then and this is why I bring up the Proverbs thing, because my dad's had a collection of proverbs, and one of his proverbs was, "You never decide with your hand on your zipper."
That's a good one. Yeah,
you decide before.
Yeah,
Who you're going to be, how you're going to live, and I have my sons, and I tell my sons, you never have to worry. Well, I shouldn't say that, because pride comes before the fall. See wisdom here. But I said, if I were to ever be unfaithful to my bride, it's not just her, it's my whole family will suffer the consequences. So our vows, our marriage vows, are sacred before God. They're sacred before they're our whole family thing. So
that's right.
I think that's an important part of the recipe.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that, because we just did a podcast and we found out that the rate of like premarital sex in the church is the same as outside of the church.
What about the divorce rates?
Same.
Okay, so I think I'm a math guy, so I'm always doing these kind of things and looking into it. And I haven't done this for a long time, so I don't know if the statistics are still valid or not.
Okay.
But last time I looked into it, something like 20 years ago, people that abstained before marriage had a better chance of surviving the marriage afterwards. Now, there's a principle in statistics, correlation versus causation. It could just be that people that have better values.
It could be.
Yeah.
And so, of course, they make better choices and better decisions, and that's why they're... But why not be in that group?
Yeah, why not?
Why not make better decisions? Okay, why not choose? And that's my point. You don't decide when you're in the heat of the moment.
Yeah, you don't.
You decide, we are going to hold ourselves to a higher standard. We're going to make better choices.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I think that's I think the right kind of fundamental starting points. If you want to have a great, I don't claim to be Solomon. I don't claim to have all the answers. And yes, my wife and I fight, and we can talk about that too. But I would say, if I was counseling a young person, I would say, decide that you're going to live a godly life. Decide you're going to have a godly marriage.
Yes.
Decide that your first commitment is to God and to His will in your life, and understand that the marriage that you have is an outward expression of a spiritual union that you also share with God.
Right.
The whole thing is elevated. And I once you know that is the way things are, it changes the whole mindset on things. So we were talking about, do we fight?
Yeah.
Yes. So of course we fight. And I could tell stories, like we fought a lot our first couple of years. I had to learn, we used to joke about it, that we never fought all those years of we always knew we were going to get married, but we never fought. And I don't really call it dating. We were just waiting. And it's funny because our people at church would tell us, oh, you should wait till you get out of college to get married. Wait till you get out of college to get married. So we were waiting, because we were listening to the wisdom of our friends.
Yeah.
And it was Christmas of my junior year, and we realized all 7 couples that we most admired at our church all got married in college. Why are we waiting? I mean, I'm as red-blooded as the next guy, right? And so it's like, that's it, we're going. So we got married right away, and then that's when we started fighting.
Oh, okay.
We never fought until we were married. And when you think about it, when you get married, that's you have to actually change. When you're living apart, you can put the toilet paper roll on one way and she can put it the other way. But when you're living together, now there are all these things that you have to learn. You have to learn to communicate. You have to learn to live in the same space with somebody else. There's a lot of lessons. But the nice thing is that you're free to, since you took vows and since you made that fundamental, foundational commitment, you're free to fight without fear. And you can have it out. And it's like, and then you get to make up at the end, and that's the fun part.
Yeah. Well, wouldn't you say, because the marriage is not just learning how to live together, right? But it really is a spiritual act. And before God, you really are unified in the spirit.
Yes.
How much do you think that plays into
it's
being
hard
together?
For me to conceive of my life in any other way. I mentioned that I met her as a 10th grader and she was a 9th grader. Did I already say that?
Yeah.
Or was that
Yeah.
beforehand?
Yeah, you said that. Mhm.
This beautiful, smart, conservative Christian girl walks into the classroom. I live in this little cow town in Northern California, and I've calculated the odds. The odds were 1 in 100,000 that we would both live in the same town.
Really?
Okay, so because
Wow.
it's the odds. It's like, and it was just immediately obvious that this is no accident, and so it's like it's not even like I have to debate every day. Well, gee, am I doing God's will or not? It's like plop, there it is, right there. It's just I have to step into His will, and I think, I don't want to sound all mysterious or something, but I really do live my life sensitive to the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
And the guidings of the Holy Spirit. And you just know sometimes. The Holy Spirit says, I want you to go here. Okay. You just go. You just sensitive to the leadings. And I really feel like that's the way it was. So not everybody perhaps gets to be lucky like that. I joke with my son, don't ask me how to date because I don't know how, because I didn't pick my wife. God did, right?
Right.
And there he was. But that's why I was so excited when my son called me in his second year and said, hey, I'm going to court somebody.
Right.
And that was a big deal to me. That shows that I raised my boy right.
Yeah.
And my youngest son, he had a girl he had a fancy for, and so of course I would ask him, how's that going with so and so, and he was saying, tell me about her, and he says, number one, most important, she loves Jesus. So and so my boys, they understand that value has been instilled right from the beginning. So that it's hard to start out better than that.
It is. It's hard. But I think you're hitting on another essential value, is that I've noticed a lot of young Christians, they don't look for that in a potential, partner, right? They're either hot or they got a nice car, but the question about Jesus doesn't come up too much. And they're wondering why are my relationships so bad?
That's a pretty obvious one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, and you're saying even if they are Christian, then they don't really consider that to be, or they're like, oh, it's too hard to find, a guy who's a Christian like me, so they just kind of look wherever and
they
don't understand how important it is.
A non-Christian or someone else.
And the world is different today than it was when I was young.
Yeah.
And, my son talks to me about that. My youngest son, he's like, Dad, there are no conservative girls left. And I don't. And as I travel the country, we joke about it. I'll be speaking at some event, and there'll be some pretty nice looking young lady there. I think God knew what He was doing when He made women. I appreciate the art that He expresses in women. And so anyway, I'll see some cute girl, and I go, man, you're a nice looking gal, and and she's obviously conservative and Christian, and I say, would you mind if I took a selfie with you and gave it to my son?
Oh, no way.
And so for a while, I was bringing selfies home. And said, yes, son, there are conservative girls out there, but they're hard to find.
Yeah.
And I agree. And he says nowadays, too, because it's a little different, guys are afraid to date.
Yes.
Because girls are, they're getting sued. There's all kinds of, and the expectations in the young people now is they have too much sexual contact too early.
Too early,
and so there's sexual diseases and things like this. And so he says guys are kind of afraid. And in a sense, that's a boon to you young Christian men and you young Christian women. Keep your hands off until you're ready to get married and make the right choices. This whole dating thing, I'm not sure that was God's idea. And if you think about if you were looking for a biblical model, when do they date?
Yeah.
Never.
Well, that was so interesting that your son mentioned the word courtship, because I, when I got older, my parents kind of introduced and kind of learned about, the difference between dating and courtship.
Yeah.
And, I guess for me, courtship meant putting that person in the context of their family and their faith and their life, and just kind of bringing them together and see if that would work, and just being really intentional about the relationship.
See, we're blessed because that's all my parents talked about was when you want to get married, you have to court the lady.
Yes.
And I'm like, what does that mean, Dad?
Yeah.
He's like, you have to know their family.
It doesn't mean
Yeah.
you're going to bring her flowers and chocolate.
Right.
It means you're about to join together two
Right.
families.
Yeah.
And what are the values and what are your goals? And it's a very important thing. Think about Jesus' model, right? And even he talks about it in his when he talks about the end times. I think the Olivet Discourse. He talks about the 10 virgins with the lamps,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And the whole point was the marriage has been decided.
It's been
Yeah.
decided, yes.
And so for the year before they get married, the guy isn't hopping in the sack with his girl every weekend.
Of
Yeah.
course.
No,
yeah.
he goes away for a year, establishes the household, prepares, and then when the bridegroom comes back, then that's what the 10 virgins with the lamps were all about, right? Because
Yes.
they welcome the bridegroom back, and now we're going to have the big consummation of the marriage.
Yeah.
And so that's a model
Yeah.
that we could follow. Or when Jacob sent Isaac to go get a wife, he said, "Go get yourself a wife and go back to this family." It's a
Right.
it's
He
a
knew.
it's a
Yeah.
specified thing. So this sort of notion, and maybe I'm sounding fuddy-duddy, but I don't think I am. This notion that you're supposed to date around and sample around, I think that's a huge wrong starting place.
Yes.
Yeah.
The
Yes.
right starting place is you ask, what is God's will in my life? And if he intends for me to be married and to have children, and then guess what? God's in charge of all the details. That person is going to come into my life and
Yeah.
and then be sensitive to the Holy Spirit's leading. And guess what? That's what I'm going to do.
Absolutely.
And that's kind of what I meant when I said follow the recipe earlier.
Yeah.
God's the creator. He knows what he's doing.
He knows what he's doing.
He invented all this.
That's
so
right.
go with the plan.
Go with the plan. It's funny you mentioned that because before we got married, an old-timey preacher told me, he goes, son, if you're practicing fornication, you're practicing for divorce. And I was like, whoa, the light bulb went on
Yes.
in my head, you know?
I agree.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
So having a good marriage actually starts even before you're married.
100%.
Wow.
Because the whole point of a marriage is you're bringing the values together, you're bringing the families together, you're bringing goals together, you're stepping into God's plan for your life together. Well, who is that? And that you don't decide that on your wedding day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All that stuff, like pastors, you're a pastor, so you know what I'm talking about. If you're going to marry somebody, and join them together, you want to do premarital counseling.
Yes.
And I think it's your job. Here, I'm giving you orders.
Yeah.
It's your job to help them recognize, okay, are you getting married because she has a hot butt and he has a hot car?
Yeah.
Or are you getting married because this is God's will in your life? And have you discussed this? And if you haven't, I'm not putting much stock in your marriage, okay? Because the whole point is, I don't really think there are some things God decides and some things we decide. I decided to wear this shirt today.
Yeah,
I'm not sure God decided that.
Yeah,
Okay.
right.
All right. But he chose my wife. And he chose who my children are going to be too. He just gave us the honor and the privilege of raising them. And so that I think there's different levels.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I know we only have a few minutes left, but what would be the one thing you would say to, let's say, a young man and a young woman that's early in their marriage? What kind of advice would you give
Early in their marriage.
Yeah.
Well, there are phases of marriage, and people that have been married will tell you this. There are times when it's hot and heavy, times when it's rough.
Yeah.
And I guess if the one piece I would just say is, look, your commitment needs to be there.
Yeah.
It's not negotiable.
Right.
Once you've said we have a vow, we're married, then have at it. Okay.
Gotcha.
And I would say, God invented this relationship. He made Adam, and then he brought along Eve. He invented the idea.
Yes.
So you're embracing something that is God's idea, and it must be a really good thing.
Yes. He said it was good.
Exactly.
He said it was good, right?
and so it's not just about the sex. It's not just about the children. Even it's about the whole package. It's a relationship, and engaging. And, I remember early on, my wife and I had some difficulty communicating because I talk so much and she listens so well. You can tell I could talk till the cows come home. It's the way God made me. Mm-hmm. We had to kind of learn each other. Yeah. And so I had to learn how she thinks. And we would fight about it. I'd say, tell me what's in your head. Yeah. Why won't you share with me? I tell you what's in my mind. Why won't you tell me what's in your... Well, that's not her personality. Her personality is she's an introvert. That's not good or bad. That's personality types. Yeah. She thinks about what she's going to say before she says it. And then she says it. I let you hear the whole process of my thoughts before I say what my final conclusion is. I want to hear that part of your... I want to hear what went into that brilliant final sentence you said to me. I want to hear that. And so, but I just learned that, right? We had to learn that doesn't mean she's being dishonest with me. That doesn't mean she's hiding anything from me. It's just a difference in communication. So we had to work out that communication. And I think that's normal in any relationship. And so I guess for a young couple that's just married, I would say every minute you invest in your relationship is worth it, and it will pay off in the long run.
Awesome. I love it. And, every time we talk to you, it just seems like time flies. And
that's because I talk so much.
Oh, man. I just love your perspective.
I have so many more questions. I would love to have you on again, talk about more of your family and everything.
Yeah, like my daughter Nellie and Down syndrome. That's an interesting an interesting topic.
Yes, that is.
Definitely.
That is.
We didn't get there at all this time, but
we'll do it again.
Yeah.
All right, you guys. So that's it for this podcast. You want to add anything to it?
I have one thing to say.
Yeah.
I just think it's so validating that we agree about so many of our values about relationships and about marriage, and just coming from such a brilliant man that the concepts in the Bible and what the Lord has told us to do is not just arbitrary, but it's practical and it really makes sense. And God is just so brilliant, the way that he planned out for how we should do relationships and how he does relationship with us. And
see, what a beautiful example. She just said in 30 seconds what took me 20 minutes to say.
Right?
You sound like my wife. I talk and talk, and then she says the brilliant summation.
You've just processed everything, all my thoughts for me, so I'll just sum it up.
Amen. That amazing podcast. Thank you, Dr. Frank, for coming on here.
Glad to be with you.
And for you guys, just remember, check out the video somewhere around here, probably here, that YouTube is going to suggest for you, and like and subscribe. Godspeed and God bless. Bye.
Bye.